Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. 2 days ago, I got my vaccine, and then yesterday, I took ill with flu-like symptoms. Last night was particularly terrible, and today, it seems like I'm over the hump, but even in spite of that, I was not able to get any reading done. I read the very first paragraph of George Eliot's Silas Marner. Yesterday, of course, was a complete bust. Now, the last thing that I read before that was People of the City by Cyprian Ekwensi, and I did finish it. And I posted a video in which I read the first... Hey, come on. I read the first page, basically, and I did not want to leave that standing as my last word on the subject. I don't expect I will be posting much about this forthcoming, and I expect to be taking some days off regardless. So I really did not want to leave that standing. I was at that moment feeling exuberant in my enthusiasm for the book. And let me say that I retained that as exuberant as I get, which it may not even be noticeable. I retained that enthusiasm for the book. I really liked it for the first half. Now, the book is divided into 2 parts. And all the way through part 1, there was no breaking of the, the illusion. And fairly early on in part 2, I started to see, I want to say the man behind the curtain, but that's really cliched. I started to notice the cracks in the structure, and as I went on, they became more pronounced, to a point where I gave up caring about who was sleeping with whom or who was dying. And so it's a bad sign when you get to that level with a book. The book is 150 pages, so it's a short read, and I'm nevertheless glad that I read the whole thing. If you look up Cyprian Ekwensi, everybody will talk about the place of the city in his work. It's not named here, but the presumption is that it's Lagos. And indeed, even without having looked anything up, I had come to that conclusion myself. The city is like a foil or a main character, really, a second protagonist, if you will. So I want to read a little bit from the book to give you a feel for it, and this will break some of the plot, but it won't break the whole thing. The big spoiler is yet to come. Now, his friend, our main character, is a fellow named Amusa Sango, and here he is having a conversation with his friend whose beloved has died. His friend says, "I have often asked, why do girls leave their happy homes and come here on their own? No brothers, no knowledge of anything, no hope. They just come to the city, hoping that some man will pick them up and make them into something. Not just one man. You can't find him at the right time, but many men. And some disease, something incurable, picks them up. You see them dressed, and they are just shells, hollow and sick." He did not lift his head as he talked. then he goes on to his case specifically. Tell me, why did she come to this city at all? Why did I have to know her? I'll tell you why she came, Kofi. She was not content with poverty. Remember, not many people like to remain where fate has placed them. I have known the home of Beatrice, I can tell you. And if you have been there yourself, you would not condemn her actions. She was running away from it. Kofi shook his head slowly, no less than 100 times. The truth was sinking in. But she threw her life away. The city eats many an innocent life like hers every day. It is a waste of our youth. It must stop. Sango laughed. Secret societies eat a lot more. But what do the people of the city care? Nothing whatever. They have created the flitter, and they are content to live in it. Yes, yes, the irony of fate, the strange turns of justice. So that gives you a sense for the book. I think it really gives you a feel for the preoccupations of the author. And I just noticed for the first time that that phrase includes the title, People of the City. So obviously it's an important passage. Now I'm going to go into a little bit more detail. Over the years, I was a playwright, and my plays were all in a bipartite structure. That was the standard at the time in Chicago. Sometime, maybe 5-10 years ago, that sort of shifted, and the typical play became a 90-minute, one-act play where the action just played straight through. But almost the entirety of my dramatic work was written in that two-act structure. It was very comfortable. And because of that, I have had thoughts about the structure and how it works. So though this is not a stage play, some of my thoughts apply. And it seems to me that in the first act, you start out with, in drama, you start out with a very small action and it expands. In the novel, that may be the way, it may not, but regardless, thematically, you have what is something of a centrifugal movement, almost an expansion. Certainly, as the plot action develops, more things keep happening and combining to the overall thrust, particularly with drama, which works in that way. As I say, a novel might be slightly different. Then you have the intermission, and Act 2 comes on. It's not that all of a sudden everything turns and you start heading towards the conclusion at that juncture. Not at all. You still have the centrifugal movement, but it becomes diminished or weakened, and at the same point, you start having a countervailing centripetal action or movement, thematically at least. And by the time you are concluding, in a play, by the time it draws to the conclusion, everything, if it's done right, should wrap up. So that was the phase where I felt that Ekwensi failed in his task. Instead of any of the closing dynamics, or rather the centripetal dynamics wrapping up or coheting or coalescing into some unified thematic action, it rather devolved into just one thing happening after another. And that was why I say I didn't particularly care who was sleeping with whom or who was dying. And that's a bad state for any novel or any work of art to arrive at. So that was my final thoughts about the novel. I mistakenly went into this thinking that it might be a collection of short stories. It was not. I won't debar myself from reading anything more by this author, but if I do, I will seek out short stories. I expect that is where his strong suit may be. I'm increasingly interested in Nigerian literature because of reading God's Children Are Little Broken Things earlier in the year. And while this is not up to that, sorry, he's pushing on the camera. And this, of course, in the timeline is much earlier. I think the time covered in this is while the British Empire is still standing and people are singing God Save the Queen. But I am increasingly interested in Nigerian literary culture. Now, I don't know how much of this author's work was perhaps funded by the CIA. If you read White Malice by Susan Williams, you learn that the CIA was active in all kinds of literary endeavors of the time. I'm not going to impute anything or make any suggestions. I don't know, but one cannot help but feel that there is some of that here. That said, he is definitely not a mouthpiece for the colonialists, and those authors never were. They were completely unaware of their funding sources. And so you are very aware in this novel of the continued extraction of the lumber being harvested for export to Europe and America and so forth. So it's definitely a valuable read. I would say especially if you are interested in modern Nigerian history. As a literary work standing apart from all of that, then it has its flaws. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.